Hello, you guys. Welcome to CastCast. I am your host, Casty Strader, and like the heading says, this is my awards pick shows. Now, I didn't see every single play and everything like that. I guess disclaimer, so I'm not gonna pick like my play of the year award. To me, there was a lot of good plays this year, but I just don't really think that I could go and say, hey, this is the play of the year in my eyes. Now, I'm going to start off with the Rookie of the Year awards, and we're going to start off with Defensive Rookie of the Year. So, to me, I look at Jared Verse as who I would pick for the Defensive Rookie of the Year. Simply put, I think that Jared Verse came onto a team with very low defensive expectations with the departure of Aaron Donald. I think that he came and he played aggressively, he played dominantly at times, showed that he could really be a mess for a guy that wasn't top of the draft class. And I understand that, placement or where you're drafted doesn't matter to go into these awards, but this is, what I think. I think that you look at Jared Verse and you really see a lot to like. Good against the run, not necessarily the best pass rusher, but something to build on for year two, and just overall a relentlessness that is what you want for a guy on the defensive line. Just an overall monster and a player that I only expect to get better and become a leader, if he isn't already, for that Rams defense. So that's my Defensive Rookie of the Year. And we're moving on to Offensive Rookie of the Year. So looking at that, I'm obviously going to say Jayden Daniels. I think that Jayden Daniels surprised everybody with just how confident, just how fluid he was, just how pretty accurate he was, to be honest with you. I do think in the playoffs he got a little bit of jitters, kind of underthrowing balls, not being as deterministic as, you think he would have been. But as we all know, it's like to get to even the NFC Championship game as a rookie is unprecedented. And, it's not taking anything away from who he is and how he'll continue to play for years and years and years. And it's like the athleticism, while it might not be the best at the quarterback position, this guy is going to be a problem for years. And it's like the fact that he had very limited weapons, essentially relying on Zach Ertz a lot, convincing Ertz to come back is a testament in and of itself to me. A guy who could easily retire. Yes, he's going to come back, and they're only scratching the surface. And then Terry McLaurin, who we've all known he's been a baller for however many years, and he's been waiting to have that dynamic QB his whole career. Essentially, probably more than halfway through his career, at 30 years old, which I hate to say because I love Terry McLaurin, but Jayden Daniels was unbelievable. Many people thought that Caleb Williams was running away with this with the weapons he has. Oh, this is such a stacked offense in terms of weapons. But he proved he had a lot more growing to do than Daniels did. And Daniels really, really cooked. The only other player that I was really thinking of, potentially, overthrowing Daniels for a little bit was Bo Nix. But in the final stretch of the season, it really, kind of proved that Bo Nix, while very, very good, it didn't quite live up to, the Jayden Daniels hype, even though he did great things as well. So moving on to the Defensive Player of the Year. To me, the Defensive Player of the Year this year, and this might be a little controversial. To me, the defensive player of the year should go to TJ Watt. Now, whether or not you think that, the Steelers, they have a sound defense or whatever, TJ Watt balled this year. And I can almost say that, and he's done it year after year after year after year. And I know that it's only, per what, year it was and that sort of thing, but it's like nothing that happened with the Steelers was on TJ Watt. TJ Watt, to me, should win Defensive Player of the Year because essentially he was the biggest threat against any team playing him, enough that it's like they have one guy chipping him, they have another guy chipping him. They have three guys engaging with TJ Watt because of how dynamic he is, because of how dangerous he is. And he's been snubbed of the award, in my opinion, for years and years and years. And it's like no other player has had to be game planned for as heavily as TJ Watt has had to be. Now, you could argue, certain players like Zach Bond, who emerged as a powerhouse this year. I'm trying to even think of like some other crazy players to me that are worthy of winning it. I guess another Eagles player, and no, I'm not an Eagles fanboy, you guys. They obviously knocked my Packers out of the playoffs or whatever, but another player is maybe Jalen Carter, with how much he was a game wrecker this year. And just, there's so many, good defensive players. I wish they could all get awards. It's one reason why we have the all-pro team, type of thing. But it's like, to me, TJ Watt was healthy all year, and goodness Lord, the motor on this guy, the skills on this guy, it's just, if I was an NFL QB, he would be the one player I would never want to have to go against. Above all else, you guys. So, my pick is TJ Watt. Does he win? Probably not. Now, offensive player of the year. Who do we give this to? I personally think that there's several guys that could get it. I'm thinking it's either Ja'Marr Chase, Joe Burrow, or you look at, one of the, running backs, it could be Henry, to be honest. It could be Saquon, and I'm going to have to give it to Saquon Barkley. I think Saquon, what he did was unprecedented. Don't get me wrong, he had the line to really be able to do that this season as well. Haven't seen as many like scot-free runs, for the distance he did, where he had to barely put on any moves, But I'm going to have to say Saquon. I think Saquon's deserving of it. I think that, the people that argue that, he should be MVP, the only reason I don't think he would get that is because of the fact that MVP usually means that the team can lean on that player in its entirety. And it's hard for a running back to do that in today's game. That's really my, the baseline standing of what I think of what MVP has come to. And overall, it's hard for a running back to do. There's a reason why the last running back was Adrian Peterson. But AP carried, who was a, mediocre coach at best, not having a good quarterback, and just essentially running over, everybody. So the offensive player of the year to me has to go to Saquon. And it's like, I think, I wouldn't mind it going to Ja'Marr Chase, It could go to Joe Burrow as well, just because of the amount of yardage that he put up. But to me, it's kind of one of those where it's hard to determine, who gets offensive player of the year. Usually it does kind of go to a wide receiver because of their production, their ability to stretch the field, create crazy mismatches, which would lean Ja'Marr Chase this year with the incredible year he had. But then obviously the guy throwing to him has to get some of the credit too, Joe Burrow. But I think it's Saquon. I think that if you look at it and that sort of thing, Saquon, consistently got him into, the situations that they were in, to where it's like, oh, he created more offense for his team as well, in the sense that it made it easier for his team to sustain drives, I guess. And now moving on, we have the comeback player of the year. I am going to have to say the comeback player of the year is Joe Burrow. Obviously suffered an injury last year. I think it's a no-brainer this year. If it goes to someone else, I think it's a slander, and I think, I would not be happy with that. I don't think there's much more to discuss. We haven't seen a guy like Burrow come back from an injury and pop off like he did. And now moving on, we have coach of the year. This year, there was a lot of good coaches. A lot of people want to give it to the Vikings head coach, thinking he did like a really, really, really great job. Now, maybe because I'm a Packers fan, I don't entirely agree with that. I think the Vikings really, they beat up, everyone. The North was, apparently unprecedented this year. And I think that every team benefited from having an easier schedule than was anticipated. So looking at, O'Connell, I like him. I think he's a good coach. I just don't think he's as good as people want to give him credit for. Not relying on the run enough, really live or die by the pass for the majority of the year. Putting the unnecessary pressure on Darnold, which I think kind of killed their season. I think they really didn't have anything to fall back on if their quarterback wasn't playing at a high level. Which put unneeded pressure on the quarterback, in my opinion. That's why they had a collapse at the end of the year. So I don't think it should be O'Connell, but the coach that I do think deserves a lot of credit is Dan Quinn. I'm sorry, I totally stuttered there for a second. I think that Dan Quinn went to the Commanders, and a lot of people looked at it, and he was like, this is a guy who isn't going to be able to change this team, who isn't going to be able to, I remember a lot of people ranking it a bad hire because Dan Quinn, is he going to be able to do well? Oh, the defense kind of floundered at the end of last year on the Cowboys. Blah, 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 blah. But this guy was a culture changer. He reminds me, he reminds me of, the Lions head coach, and it just, I think that Dan Quinn, it can't be understated how he was able to make this team play better than a lot of people thought they were. Yes, they had errors, but this is a team without a lot of talent. We're talking about a team that I think is third highest in cap space, going into this offseason. They're going to have a lot of spending money to put talent around Jayden Daniels to, get players for that defense that are going to be able to make more of an impact. Not to say there's anything wrong with the guys they have, but I definitely think that, good coaching can improve players from like an average standpoint to an above average standpoint. That's what I think we saw from the Commanders this year. A real shock this year. I don't think if there was anybody that actually put money, for them to make the playoffs, I'm sure they had a big payday before the season. And now moving on to the most valuable player. To me, I mean, the topic of the discussion has been Josh Allen against Lamar Jackson. And to me, it is Josh Allen. Here is the reason why. Lamar Jackson is phenomenal. He can do everything. He can do everything that Josh Allen can do, to an extent, I think. But he also is on a more stacked team. Don't get me wrong. Josh Allen has, James Cook, who's become a very, very, very good back. And I think he started to scratch the surface of how good he could be for years with, how he put on some more weight. He was a lot more feisty. He was able to break more tackles and still have that really good speed, but you look at the Ravens and they just have a much more balanced team. They have a much better defense to me than the Bills. Not that the Bills defense is bad, but there were times that they were getting pretty diced up. And it's one of the reasons why I feel like they lost, to the Chiefs in the championship round, is because they gave up a lot of points in the first half and they were seemingly being unable to stop. But it's like, if you look at that offense, yeah, you have Dawson Knox, Cook, like I mentioned, who, are kind of the veteran pieces, in terms of weapons. And I guess Amari Cooper, who they brought in. But they brought in Amari Cooper to kind of be a help to Allen, and he really wasn't late in the season. He really didn't blossom the way that I thought he would. He's always been a good, hands catcher, good route runner type of thing, but maybe he just didn't mesh with the system they had, type of thing. But it's like, you look at Josh Allen and the way that he's able to, get punished and essentially will his team to victory. A young team that has, Shakir, Hollins, and, and their other younger wide receivers. I don't think that if you took out Allen, I just don't think that the Bills function. I think that they would have to end up playing a lot more conservative football. And it's like, well, they have a pretty good O-line. I don't think that you would be able to lean on Cook being the workhorse back, without the threat of Allen. They have a really good balance, and Allen is the mold for that team. Don't get me wrong, I think that Lamar Jackson could very well win this thing. He's very electric. He does, a lot of good things, and you can't hold anything really against Lamar Jackson, but I'll say this, there were definitely times when, you want to close out games or whatever, and you're just not able to close them out. And I think that Allen really proved that he can go with the best in the league and, the toughest in the league and be able to go toe to toe and beat them. So my MVP is Josh Allen. Won't be disappointed if it's, Lamar Jackson. If Saquon gets voted MVP, that would be, insane too to me. But those are my picks for, the NFL honors, in a couple nights on the 6th. But if you guys have any other different picks, tell me what you think. I, would love to hear. And if you have, who you think should be the Walter Payton NFL Man of the Year award, it's a tough thing to, determine, I guess, each year, unless you're following every single player on every single team and what they do, off the field, may the best man win that award. But otherwise, that's it for this episode of CastCast. I am your host, Casty Streeter, and as always, go Pack Go.